Serious, currently what is the greatest threat to humanity? Antibiotic-resistant bacteria is pretty scary stuff. The rapidly approaching threat of humanity returning to a pre-antibiotic era, or entering a post-antibiotic era, due to abusive use of antimicrobials coupled with a rapid reduction of discovery and a lack of currently approved alternative approaches. Edit. You can look at it as entering a post-antibiotic era, or returning to a pre-antibiotic era. One and the same really in this situation. Misinformation. The ocean slowly dying. Once that ecosystem collapses, we won't be able to feed ourselves. Governments will crumble pretty quickly. Didn't expect this to blow up. So glad to see all you earth-loving hippies and support. Herd mentality. Biodiversity loss. Closely followed by nuclear weapons and global warming. I think people underestimate the problem that biodiversity loss is. Climate change is a huge problem. But I think biodiversity loss is even more problematic. There is a total collapse of insect populations. We begin to see a huge decline in bird populations. Other species will 100% be impacted, and I don't want to admit it, but it'll sooner or later impact food production. And that's where people will realize that shit hit the fan. OFC if we manage to find new sources of oil so that we can attain +6C by 2100. Climate change will be a bigger problem. Unless we mitigate it with a nuclear winter. And basically all our major problems can be summed by one word. Greed. Cumbre Vieja volcano on Canary Islands is probably the most pressing threat that nobody talks about. We don't talk about it. But an eruption and the subsequent collapse of the volcano into the ocean would, according to some scientific studies, generate a mega tsunami that would wipe out most cities on the Atlantic coast. Willful ignorance. The demonization of experts and academics to the extent that people are congratulating themselves for being uneducated. Eater. With thanks to the Redditor who knows who they are for the silver. I'm slightly overwhelmed by the response this post has got. And I'm going to use this edit to make the point that I'm not an academic myself. But I know a few. And I know how bloody hard they had to work to get to where they are now. And to see all that effort. All that intellect denigrated by selfish, malicious idiots just so they can carry on self-justifying dragging the rest of us into the abyss with them. Really boils my piss. Ahem. Eater 2. The Revenge. And my first gold. I'm genuinely quite touched. Excess consumption of resources versus the planet's ability to produce and recover. We consume more than we can produce. Which means any disaster could tip the scales into a deficiency. Too much and you would get a collapse. Without compensation. The fact that people don't trust scientific evidence anymore. The fact that people idolize important people so much that they think those people can't commit any wrongs. Weaponizing bipartisan issues in every country, making everything else a team sport rather than a shade of grey. People would vote for the worst thing on earth just to be on the winning side. The average person has no understanding that there are more bots on the internet than people. That every interaction serves only to make them more pliable to the will of whoever pulls the strings that day. Antibiotic resistance. Poor critical thought skill, ignorant individual, hive mind, idiotic society, loss of freedom. Starting with freedom of speech. Have you read Fahrenheit 451? I often revisit this old fav of mine. It's interesting to see that this book does not really depict a dire totalitarian regime that forbids and burns books. It's about a society that has become so ignorant, manipulated and stupid that it's the very own citizens who start finding books offensive and ask the gov to burn and forbid them. Of course. The gov obliges. Rings a bell? Humans themselves are the greatest threat to humanity. We can create entire civilizations in years. Maybe even decades. But it only would take us a few months to destroy it. Especially with the technological advances we have made over the past few years. The horrifying combination of apathy and stupidity. Habitat destruction. Coronal mass ejection striking the earth. I think a lot of our infrastructure isn't designed to handle it, and even just a few days of power and internet going out across the civilized world could wreck us as a society. Been looking for this answer. One narrowly missed us in 2012 Ike. If a big enough one hit, we'd be out of power for much longer than a few days. A planet-wide imp wave. That we can do nothing to stop. We can only prepare and hope for the best. 33. A corrupt and flawed governmental system. Humans. The need for immediate gratification. Nearly every other threat is because of this one. China. Misinformation and misunderstanding science. I feel like a lot of the problems mentioned here could be explained as a symptom of the wealthy and powerful protecting their interests. Corporate greed. Climate change denialism. Communism. Climate change. Neoliberalism and the do-nothing attitude towards climate change. This will be downvoted, but I'll say social media. Lot of people taking videos and snapshots first, then helping actual people in danger because they want to post something unusual on their social accounts. Overpopulation in poorest parts of the world. While civilized Western world culture is in a state of decay, values, traditions, etc. Similarly to the things that led to fall of the Rome. Savage poor regions of the world are producing people by millions. The inequality leads to migration and conflicts. While Western propaganda sells solar panels, electrical cars in the name of global warming. Desperate people trying to make a living are destroying the environment they live in. Cutting everything that can give some profit. We are way over the sustainable population now. The nature will take its course to reduce it. WW3 will be very effective in that. Why pick one? 1. Global climate change. 2. Ourselves. Human society is coming to the point where we are devolving. Yes. Knowledge and medical advances have allowed humans to survive certain illnesses. But our survival comes at a price. Humans have pretty much tricked natural selection BC of these said medical advances. People today who would be deemed too mentally physically weak for survival hundreds of years ago are given the gift of life, and with it, the ability to create their own offspring, thereby producing more generations of mentally physically incompetent members of society. On top of that, greed and capitalism will always triumph over society. Who makes more money than the top pharmaceuticals? Global warming. Ourselves. There's an increasing amount of people who are actively denying science. People who deny climate change. And meanwhile our own governments are choosing profit over the safety of us. There won't be some big disaster or meteor to kill us. We'll end up killing ourselves as a species. Well, we're ruled by weird occult pedo cults that have spent literally billions over the decades to convince climate change isn't real, while these elite pedos rake and record profits. While the rights and wages of workers get trampled by these psychopaths. While the middle class gets hollowed out so they don't pose a threat anymore. All the while people are arguing over which puppet should be their leader. All the while the men in the background ruling over our countries continue their vile work. As we head faster and faster to the edge. And nobody seems to know how to stop it. If they even believe it needs to be stopped. I'd say probably ourselves. Ultimately we are the root to all of the climate change going on. We possess weapons so powerful they could end humanity in an instant. We overconsume resources and we are slowly oversaturating the planet with humans. We are our own extinction event if given the right circumstance. Humanity. Misinformation and fake news.